This is Josh Friedman coming to you from the edge of Lake Victoria in Mwanza, Tanzania, at the conclusion of a nearly 3-month stay in Tanzania. I have practically been here for an entire 90 days, which is the time allotted to me on my visa on arrival that I got upon arrival in Zanzibar back on December 1st. It is now almost the end of February, and I thought I'd give you a recap of my nearly 90 days in Tanzania. I expect that this is going to be my last night in the country. I'm trying to head out into Rwanda tomorrow. I'm not positive I will cross the border, as I see what looks like a mosquito behind me. Hopefully I don't get bitten. I'm not certain I'm going to cross the border tomorrow, but I likely will. You can see a little remains of this incredibly beautiful sunset here on the shores of Lake Victoria. Right over here is the Mwanza ferry terminal, where you can board a boat that I believe takes you to another boat or another location that then can take you to Uganda or elsewhere along beautiful and massive Lake Victoria. As I was discussing yesterday, Lake Victoria is the largest lake in all of Africa, and what I didn't mention is that it's, I believe, one of the 3 largest lakes in the entire world. And I guess that's a perfect segue into how I'm going to start this recap of my time in Tanzania. So this is not going to be really a video for tourists, although at the end I'll throw in a little bit of some tips and some observations I've got about tourism and travel here in Tanzania. But I'd like to really recap my experience in Tanzania from the standpoint of what I'm seeing that this country is and has to offer, and what its place is in the grander scheme of things in the world and in geopolitics and maybe geoeconomics. So since I'm on the lake, I might as well delve right into the fact that this country is certainly blessed with resources, and possibly no more so than water. I spent most of my time right next to the Indian Ocean. I was in Zanzibar for a month and a half. That ate up actually more than half of my time in Tanzania. And then I spent a full month in Dar es Salaam. So I was on the Indian Ocean for the majority of my time here. But now I've been in Mwanza for the past couple days on huge Lake Victoria. I have not seen Lake Tanganyika. I believe Lake Malawi also crosses into Tanzania. So Tanzania is right in the heart of Africa's Great Lakes region, and possibly, I guess it really is the country that in Africa has the most, if not surface area of lake, and it might be, I haven't looked that up. I mean, it really is, it's got probably more going for it in terms of lakes than any other country in the region. I discussed in the previous video some of the significance of Lake Victoria, but I'm not going to harp on lakes right now. So there's the Indian Ocean, there's these important lakes in Africa, there's obviously Mount Kilimanjaro, which seems to be more of a resource in terms of tourism than in terms of any other major factor. It's really getting dark, so you're not seeing me so well. I don't think I can really improve the lighting, but you can hear me fine, and you're still getting somewhat of a beautiful sunset. Seeing if I back up towards the lake a little bit, is the lighting any better? Probably not. Anyway, the country's got some mineral wealth as well, which I haven't really looked into. It's got 2 very significant ports, touching on the water theme. The port in Dar es Salaam is the major port on the east coast of Africa, and the port here in Mwanza, which actually there are a couple ports. I just tried to get a glance at one and didn't see a whole lot of activity there. The ports here in Mwanza are the major ports, or are major ports along the shores of Lake Victoria. The population and demographics of the country are probably another major asset. I got into that in depth in Dar es Salaam. Right now, the country's not that huge in terms of population. It actually has a lot of land. I haven't double checked, but I think I read once before that it's the 11th largest country by land size in the world. Right now the population, I think, is around 55 million, but it's supposed to explode, as I discussed in depth in Dar es Salaam. So this country definitely has assets, for sure. And the tourism sector here appears to be way more developed than the tourism sectors in neighboring countries and around most of Africa. Like I said, I haven't been climbing the mountain, not on this trip. I'd like to return to do that. I haven't been going on safaris, but I did spend more than half my time in Zanzibar, which is turned into basically nothing but tourism. The spice trade seems long gone there. The slave trade is gone, has been gone for 100 years from Zanzibar. But yeah, so the country's got quite a bit going for it. But I would say I probably have noticed, and now I'm really going to get into some personal anecdotes. I've noticed some, let's just call them issues. As I was referencing in the video yesterday from Lake Victoria, there's this film, Darwin's Nightmare, and I finally got the chance to watch it, and it paints a really bleak picture of life here in Mwanza and life in Tanzania. And to some extent, I think it might be painting too bleak of a picture, although I haven't delved deep into the circles that were being exposed in that film, which includes just the impoverished orphans and prostitutes, and it just really went into depth in showing you the despair of certain people here in Mwanza, and arguably that's the case in Tanzania as a whole. But I would say that to some extent my experience in the country corroborates that. And one anecdote I'd like to touch on right away is all around the country, everywhere I go, whether it be in Zanzibar, although in specific areas of Zanzibar, or in Dar es Salaam, or here, all the way across the country, I keep running into people who are begging me for money and going about it by either outright saying in English that they're hungry, or rubbing their hand around their belly and making it obvious that they're giving a sign that they're hungry. And I was really taken aback by this, because it wasn't just if I'd walk into some village, there would be some little kids rubbing their belly or people running up to me asking for money. People I wouldn't expect were asking me for money and saying, I'm hungry. Now, I gotta say up front, maybe some of these people were trying to scam me. There are a lot of desperate people here, and there are a lot of people trying to take advantage of tourists, and I show up as a Mzungu, as a white man, and that just screams to people that I've got a lot of money, whether it's true or not. But I was really taken aback by certain instances. Like, for instance, I was walking out of my hotel in Dar es Salaam, the center of Dar es Salaam, and the security guard looks at me as I'm walking by and says, I'm hungry, give me money. I'm thinking, what? I mean, you're employed as the security guard at a hotel in the city center of this giant city, and you're telling me that you're hungry and you need money. And there was at least one other employee at some other place I stayed where telling me the same thing. I'm hungry, give me money. And just everywhere I go. It happened to me yesterday at some random place. I was at a nursery by accident as I was walking around getting lost here in Mwanza, and the people there saying, we're hungry, give me money. Heard it over and over and over again, whether it be little kids rubbing their belly, like I said, or people who seem to be gainfully employed saying, I'm hungry. And my hunch is that there's some truth to that. The film Darwin's Nightmare kept discussing existing or possible famine in Tanzania. That was back about 15 years ago. I haven't researched that, by the way. But yeah, my impression is that, okay, maybe there are a bunch of scammers here, but I think a lot of people are going to bed hungry at night. And that screams to me that there's still a lot of poverty in this country. Another anecdote I've got is going to start with my time back in Zanzibar. And I came across this phenomenon there, which I both physically saw it play out a couple times, and then had it explained to me by some of the locals as well. There's some phenomenon in which there are large families, it seems to be very common there, large families in which there is one person, usually some young man, who's supporting everyone. He probably works 2 or 3 jobs, and he supports the parents, the grandparents if they're alive, the younger siblings, maybe the older siblings, and often case, pretty much the rest of the family just sits around, and this one guy works and works and works. And I saw it play out both on the coast, in the East Coast, in Jambiani. There was one guy in particular who I'd very much recommend for all kinds of stuff, for providing you reasonably cheap accommodation if you want it. He was a taxi driver. He would stay up all night driving taxis. He'd be making breakfast in the morning. He wouldn't sleep, and he was running a guest house there, just doing everything. In Stone Town, I came across at least one person who was working multiple jobs every day, would work during the day, then go to a job at night, or would work the mornings and then work the entire day. And I saw it over and over again. And I've seen a similar dynamic elsewhere in the country, particularly here in Mwanza, where it seems like, not necessarily in a family, but in a work environment, there's one person working, doing everything, and there are 10 people standing around. And this phenomenon seems to be pretty apparent throughout the country. Again, I apologize about the darkness. I'll wrap this up because it's getting so dark. But yeah, so this brings into question work ethic and the transition from Ujamaa, or this agrarian-based socialism of Julius Nyerere, to a market economy. So as Tanzania shifts in this changing world, as the economy gets liberalized, as the country becomes urbanized, and as things become digitized, or as technology progresses, it's going to be interesting to see how the country and the workforce and this great resource they have in terms of human capital, how it adapts to the changing world, the changing times, the changing economy and economic climate, and changing structure of the economy. They've got this huge and rapidly growing workforce, but how productive is it going to be? That's something that I call into question a bit, but maybe that's going to change a lot with the times. All right, I've given you a couple anecdotes. It's getting super dark, so I'm going to wrap this up with the part about tourism, just a little brief recap and some pointers and tips about tourism here. I'm going to do that from my hotel room. So goodbye for now, and I'll see you in my hotel. And God said, "Let there be a hotel room." And then there was light. Well, you can actually see me now. How's that for a change of pace and change of setting? But I'm not going to talk about the setting anymore because we got to wrap this up. Been going too long already. One last anecdote, maybe two actually. On my way over here, it so happened that I hopped on the back of some guy's motorcycle. Basically, these random motorcyclists who are parked alongside the road are the primary taxi services here in Mwanza. Well, I hopped on the back of this guy's bike and he took me to my hotel. The ride took about 5 minutes and it cost a whopping 1,000 Tanzanian shilling, which is the equivalent of 43 cents, 43 US cents, which I would say is quite cheap for a 5-minute taxi ride. All right, it wasn't a taxi, it was a motorcycle, but it was more efficient and faster than the taxi because you can weave through traffic and whatnot. Anyway, I think that is notable both as it relates to the economic and poverty discussion as I was having before, as well as tourism. The country is, in general, not talking about Zanzibar at the moment, but in general, it's very cheap. If this taxi driver can afford to charge me 43 US cents for a 5-minute ride, I don't think he's making a lot of money. And I didn't have to negotiate down to 43 US cents. That was his initial offer and I took it. So you can see people here don't make a lot of money, at least not most of them. And actually, with regard to Zanzibar, yeah, it's pretty expensive. Zanzibar is more expensive than the mainland, but I don't see a whole lot of that tourism money, those tourism dollars and euros trickling down to the average Zanzibaris. I saw quite a lot of poverty over there, not just on the mainland. And then very quickly, before I get back to tourism and Zanzibar and the mainland, the last little anecdote, which you might have noticed, I haven't really interviewed anyone during my stay in Zanzibar. I did do this East Africa trip intro with someone who's from the mainland and living and working in Zanzibar, but it wasn't really that much of an interview. And I would say the reason why you're not seeing interviews is because I've had a whole lot of difficulty getting people, first of all, to have any sort of discussion about politics and to have a genuine discussion about politics, let alone go on camera. And my impression is that there is a bit of a political dictatorship here in Tanzania. I'm not saying the country is a complete dictatorship, by no means, but there's been one ruling party that's been in power for a long time, and my impression is that people are not very comfortable having frank or even any discussions about politics in public, and a lot of people just don't want to discuss politics at all, and that gives me the impression that there's not a whole lot of freedom of expression in Tanzania, but I'm not going to drag on about that anymore. All right, tourism, some pointers, some tips. I guess I already explained to you that Zanzibar is, generally speaking, much more expensive than the mainland. Now, there are definitely some very good deals. There's some very good bang for the buck in Zanzibar, but you need to know where to look or do a little searching. You can definitely find it, and probably in the various places across the main island, and maybe in Pemba as well. I haven't been to Pemba, but I found bang for the buck that I was very pleased with on the East Coast as well as in Stone Town, but it wasn't always initially apparent. If you would like some help finding some good deals in Zanzibar, feel free to leave a comment below or contact me directly by email. I would be glad to help out because, hey, as I've expressed before, I really loved my time and my stay in Zanzibar, and I'm sure I'll be going back there at some point. And I really haven't actually seen that much of Zanzibar, given that I was there for a month and a half. I've only been to a few different places on the main island. Now, with regard to the mainland, I'll hit on Dar es Salaam first, where I did spend a whole month. I would say that although Dar es Salaam has very little appeal to tourists, it's very much an underrated tourist destination. Dar es Salaam offers a whole lot of bang for the buck. It is a lot cheaper than Zanzibar, and given the fact that it is a coastal location, and B, a soon-to-be massive city, and it's already a large city. So it's already a large city on the coast in a tropical climate and environment. So yeah, it's got something to offer. There are beach resorts, and I was shocked at some of the prices I was seeing. Like I saw some large, nice hotel rooms at beach resorts going for $40 during the high season in Dar es Salaam. Now, I didn't go to Dar to hang out on the beach, as you can see from the videos that I did there. Although I did visit a couple beaches. They weren't so nice, but that's okay. I got my beautiful beach time in Zanzibar. But yeah, the hotels were very, very reasonably priced, if not outright cheap, in Dar es Salaam. The food, you could get very good deals on food, and the transportation is actually kind of unique because they've got a whole combination of stuff. They've got taxis, who are known to rip off tourists, competing with Uber, which it's kind of hard to get ripped off if you take an Uber, albeit if you pay cash, as you can do in Dar. I've heard about people getting ripped off paying cash for an Uber ride. But yeah, the Uber system is functioning very well there, and it's super cheap. I've had like 30, 45-minute Uber rides across town stuck in traffic, even on a Friday evening, and the grand total comes out to like $3 or $4. So transport, and there are other forms of transport there, like the tuk-tuks and whatnot. So basically everything in Dar is very cheap, and Dar is the primary transit location in the country. A lot of people are coming and going from Dar on their way to or from Zanzibar, Kilimanjaro, safaris. So it's an important transit location, and I think it's worth at least a short stay there. And you can at least say that you saw the city before it turned into this giant mega city, as I've been discussing in prior videos. Now, obviously, as I've mentioned, I didn't climb Mount Kilimanjaro. I haven't gone on safari, so I'm not going to talk about them directly, but I would say that if you are going to spend the big money to climb the mountain and go on safaris, albeit if you go as a group, you can drive down your costs for sure. But if you do spend the big bucks on the major tourist attractions in Tanzania, you can easily balance that off with very cheap living or very cheap housing, accommodation, food, and whatnot when you're not on the safari and when you're not climbing the mountain. On the mainland, you can easily find cheap hostels or budget hotels. It seems like in basically all of the significant cities, there is pretty cheap accommodation. So you can spend the big bucks on the safari or climbing the mountain or both, and then save money while you're recuperating or visiting some of the cities or seeing what else there is on the mainland. Mwanza has got beautiful Lake Victoria. It might be an underrated tourist destination, and it's fairly important transit destination, coming and going from elsewhere in East Africa, such as Rwanda or Uganda. So maybe Mwanza is worth a visit, particularly if you're traveling elsewhere in the region. Well, that's about it for my stay. I hope to come back to Tanzania, not just to Zanzibar, but to the mainland, and I see Dar as an important location in the region, if not the world, in years to come. So I see myself coming back, and I'll probably have plenty more tips and travel pointers for you in the years to come if you are so interested. But like I said, feel free to contact me or leave a comment below if you would like to hear more. This has gone on for a long time, at least for the final 10 plus minutes of the video. You've gotten to see my face, or maybe that's unfortunate for you. Maybe you'd rather stare into the abyss with the slight little sunset that was disappearing and disappeared by the very end of the first segment. Maybe that's more appealing to you than seeing my face in this hotel room, but nonetheless, asante sana. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for following along on this nearly 3-month journey across Tanzania. I am very grateful for this experience. This is the longest I've spent in any African country, and I thought because of that, it would make sense for me to relay to you my impressions of the country as a whole. So from Mwanza, Tanzania, goodbye from, well, Tanzania, and I hope to be coming to you very shortly in the near future from Rwanda. Goodbye for now.